So America has to make a choice about how to proceed in its response to the Wuhan coronavirus. Should we tolerate some cases and some deaths? Some countries, many countries have done that. Or should we bring back total lockdowns and universal outdoor mask wearing, as Joe Biden apparently now says we should? Alex Berenson has thought a lot about this. He's the author of Unreported Truths About COVID-19 and Lockdowns Part 2, available on Amazon. We're happy to have him on tonight. So, Alex, how should we proceed? What's the rational way for the country to respond at this point?
Well, I mean, it looks to me like Sweden is not a bad model for us to follow. You know, the Swedes came under very heavy fire in March and April and even May. People said, oh, you know, they're letting this virus go unchecked. They're messing up what the rest of Europe is trying to do. They have so many cases and so many deaths. And guess what? Sweden appears to be through the worst, not just the worst, but almost its entire epidemic. There are very, very few people in ICUs right now in Sweden with COVID. There are very few deaths this month in Sweden with COVID. Meanwhile, parts of the rest of Europe are seeing new rises in cases, and more accurately, I should say positive tests, because I have to say this over and over again. A positive test does not necessarily mean a clinically meaningful full case. It doesn't necessarily mean you're sick with the virus. So, right. So you know, the Swedish model is looking better and better. We're not going to know, you know, for 3 months or 6 months or a year, but it is certainly looking better. Or we can be New Zealand. In New Zealand, they've sort of committed to this idea of we're going to have no cases. This is so terrible. This thing, which so many people don't even know they have and recover from without ever even realizing they were sick, is so terrible that we can have no cases you know, on our islands anywhere. They just had, you know, and so they underwent a very hard lockdown in March and April. They have pretty strict border quarantines. They were so proud of themselves because they had no cases for 100 days. And guess what? All of a sudden this week, they have new cases again, community transmission. They don't really know where it came from. And they're locking down again. And they're mandatorily quarantining people. In other words, they are physically separating people and removing them from their homes who are infected with this. I guess the technical, it should be mandatory isolation, not mandatory quarantine, because you're isolated if you're sick, not quarantined. But the point is, some of those people are actually resisting, according to New Zealand, or according to press accounts. So do we want to be that? Do we want to be so afraid of this thing, this virus, which, according to the CDC in May, kills 1 in 400 people it infects, and most of those people are, you know, extremely elderly or have severe comorbidities? Or do we want to be a country that accepts that there's some risk here, and we have to move forward, we have to have schools, we're going to let the hospitals handle this? And to me, the choice is clear, but convincing Americans of this has been very difficult.
Because they're terrified, and that fear is, of course, being used by the usual suspects. Alex Berenson, thank you for that rational analysis. There's very little of that in America. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Tucker.